Easter Island and you look at the sites there, the statues, the megalithic walls, you realize they're much older than what, history tells us. For over a century, the world thought Easter Island's famous stone heads were just that, heads. And probably those heads do represent their original builders. Then in 2010, archaeologists started digging, much older than traditional archaeologists have suggested. What they uncovered beneath the soil wasn't just surprising. You don't realize that they're really buried, right up to their chest. It fundamentally changed our understanding of what these monuments are and what happened to the people who built them. The wrong picture in our heads. Everyone knows the Easter Island heads. They're some of the most photographed ancient monuments on Earth. But for over 250 years, we've only been looking at the top third of them. It's one of the most famous photographs in the world. But what if that picture was a lie? Not an intentional lie, of course, but a misconception hiding in plain sight. What if those famous heads were just the tip of the iceberg? For centuries, that's exactly what they were. Everyone, from the earliest explorers to modern tourists, saw the same thing. Giant heads. It became the undeniable truth about Easter Island. But a group of archaeologists started asking a very simple, yet revolutionary question. What if we just dig a little deeper? This brings us to the year 2010 and a dedicated team called the Easter Island Statue Project, led by archaeologist Joe and Van Tilburg. These objects are very friable. They're very fragile. They're not going to last forever. And the record that we're certain of, is required in order to take care of them properly. Their focus was the mother lode, the source of almost all the statues, the volcanic quarry of Rano Raraku. This place is like a factory frozen in time. Hundreds of moai are scattered around it, some finished, some still being carved right out of the rock. But the team zeroed in on two specific giants buried up to their shoulders on the quarry's outer slope. These were the ones. They were going to be the first moai to be fully excavated with modern, painstaking, scientific precision. Every speck of dirt, every stone, every artifact would be recorded and analyzed. This had never been done before. So the digging began. It wasn't about rushing in with heavy machinery. It was a slow, careful process of brushing away centuries. As the team worked down inch by inch, something incredible began to emerge. It wasn't just more neck, it was a body. Shoulders appeared, then a torso, then arms with delicate hands and elongated fingers carved in relief against the stone. These were not just heads. They were complete full-bodied statues buried in place up to their necks. The iconic head was merely the top of a massive figure that had been swallowed by the earth over hundreds of years. One of the world's most famous archaeological sites had been completely misunderstood. The revelation was staggering, but the discoveries on the bodies themselves were even more mind-blowing. Protected from wind and rain by the very soil that hid them. The backs of the statues were covered in intricate, beautiful carvings. These weren't plain stone slabs. They were canvases of art etched with symbols that held deep meaning for their creators. The most common and stunning design was a crescent shape, believed to represent the canoes that the first Polynesian settlers used to voyage across the vast open ocean to reach this remote island. It was a signature, a story carved into the back of every giant, a permanent tribute to their incredible journey and ancestry. These ancestors had navigated over 2,000 miles of open Pacific Ocean to reach this island, one of humanity's most remarkable seafaring achievements. This one excavation changed everything. It proved that the moai were far more complex and detailed than anyone had ever imagined. They were hidden giants, waiting for the right moment to reveal their true forms. And this was just the beginning of the story. The real shock was about to come from why they were built in the first place. The soil, the stones, and the people. Unearthing the full bodies of the moai was a landmark moment. But for the archaeologists on the ground, the biggest surprise wasn't just the statues themselves. Transportation of the moai in Easter Island is perhaps one of the most important archaeological problems we have. It was what they found around them. This dig was about so much more than just confirming the statues had bodies. It was about understanding the world these giants lived in. As the team carefully excavated the two moai, they didn't just document the stone. They documented everything. They took thousands of photographs, made detailed drawings, and used advanced technology to create 3D models. They collected soil samples and analyzed every fragment of rock and tool they found. This wasn't just for history books. It was for the future. By understanding how the stone was weathering and what the environment was doing to it, they could finally create a real plan to preserve these ancient wonders for generations to come. But then came the finding that truly rewrote the narrative of Rapa Nui. As the team explored the Rano-Raraku quarry, they made a startling connection. This place wasn't just a giant stone workshop. It was a vibrant, complex landscape where industry, spirituality, and daily life collided. And right there, amidst the half-carved giants and the stone tools, was evidence of agriculture. The quarry produced a byproduct, fine rock dust from the carved tough stone. Chemical analysis showed this dust was rich in minerals. Researchers theorized it enhanced soil fertility, creating conditions where crops like sweet potatoes and taro could grow in the quarry area. The popular story of Easter Island is one of ecological collapse, a people who cut down all their trees and descended into chaos. But this discovery paints a completely different picture. It shows a society that was brilliantly adaptive. They weren't just mindlessly carving statues. They were integrating that industry into their survival. The quarry was a sacred, industrial, and agricultural hub all at once. The moai weren't a cause of collapse. They were part of a sophisticated and sustainable system. And who was doing this work? This brings us to the most important part of the entire project, the people. The Easter Island Statue Project was never just an outside team coming in to uncover secrets. It was a collaboration. Professional archaeologists and geologists worked side by side with local Rapa Nui workers. These were men and women whose ancestors actually built the moai. They weren't just hired hands. They were mentored, trained in archaeological techniques, and became an integral part of the discovery process. They brought a deep cultural understanding to the work that no outsider could ever possess. This was their history being uncovered, and they were the ones leading the charge. This connection between science and community gave the project its true soul. It ensured that the secrets of the moai were being returned to the people who had the deepest right to them, guardians of the clan. If you were to stand in front of one of the famous coastal moai on Easter Island, we have these huge heads and torsos that are carved out of the volcanic rock. They are called the moai. You notice something very specific. Their backs are to the endless blue of the Pacific Ocean. They are not looking out to sea, watching for visitors or invaders. Instead, their giant stone eyes are locked inward, gazing across the land. This was no accident. This was the entire point. Every single one of these coastal giants was erected on a massive stone platform called an ahu. Think of an ahu as a sacred stage. But these platforms were so much more than just a base. They were the spiritual heart of the community. And the moai standing upon them were chosen for a profound duty, to be eternal guardians. But who or what were they guarding? The answer lies in the very soul of the Rapa Nui people. These statues were not just random monuments. Each moai represented a deified ancestor, a powerful chief, a revered leader, or a founding family member. In the Polynesian world, the power of a person did not simply vanish when they died. This spiritual energy, known as mana, remained. The Rapa Nui people believed they could capture this mana and house it within the stone of the moai. So, these statues became living repositories of spiritual power. By placing them on the ahu with their backs to the danger and uncertainty of the open ocean, and their faces toward the village, the people were putting their most powerful protectors on permanent watch. The ancestors were brought to life in stone to forever watch over their children and their children's children. Their gaze was not empty. It was filled with purpose. It was a gaze of blessing, of protection, and of connection. This protective role was incredibly practical in a spiritual sense. The moai watched over everything that meant life to the community. They guarded the fresh water sources, which were precious on the island. They watched over the gardens and the agricultural fields, ensuring fertility and a good harvest. They looked directly into the villages, maintaining order and spiritual well-being. At Ahu Tongariki, 15 moai overlook agricultural terraces and a fresh water source. The ancestors weren't just symbolically watching. They were positioned to guard the community's survival resources. The community could live their lives, farm their food, and raise their families, all under the benevolent, watchful eyes of their own ancestors. It was a constant, unbreakable link between the living world and the spirit world, and all of this happened from the platform of the Ahu. These were not simple piles of rock. They were expertly engineered structures, often with burial chambers inside them. This made the Ahu a powerful, multi-layered symbol. It was a tomb for the physical body, a stage for the ancestral spirit in the form of the moai, and a ceremonial site where the living could come to communicate with the dead. The size and grandeur of an Ahu and the moai upon it were a direct reflection of a clan's status and power. A bigger, more elaborate Ahu with massive moai shouted the strength and importance of that family for all to see. The celestial sentinels of Ahu Akivi. Now, just when you think you understand the rules, Easter Island throws you a curveball. A massive stone 7-part curveball. Meet the moai of Ahu Akivi. We have all these statues, and the faces of the statues do not look like the Easter Islanders. These 7 statues are the famous rebels, the exceptions to the rule, and their story is one of the most fascinating on the island. Remember the rule: coastal moai have their backs to the sea, watching over the villages. Well, Ahu Akivi is located inland, about 1.5 miles from the coast. So, you would expect these moai to be facing inward, right? But they are not. They stand on their platform staring directly out toward the coastline. Their gaze is fixed on the vast, empty horizon. This is so visually strange, so different from all the others that it demands an explanation. Why are these 7 giants breaking all the rules? The first clue lies in the sky. These are not just randomly placed statues. They are precision instruments of stone. The platform they stand on has a perfect astronomical alignment. The 7 moai face the exact point on the horizon where the sun sets during the southern hemisphere's spring equinox. Behind them, the sun rises during the autumn equinox. This is not a coincidence. This proves the Rapa Nui people were not just master sculptors. They were brilliant astronomers. They built a celestial observatory in stone, marking the changing of the seasons with an accuracy that is stunning even today. But science is only one part of the story. The other part is legend. Oral tradition tells of the legendary first king, Hotu Matua, who led his people to this island. The story says he sent 7 young explorers ahead of the main canoe as scouts to find and prepare the new homeland. These 7 moai are believed to represent those 7 brave scouts. Of nearly 900 moai on Easter Island, only these 7 face the ocean from an inland location. Their unique seaward gaze makes perfect sense with this legend. They are not watching over a village. They are forever looking back across the ocean toward their mythical homeland of Hiva, perhaps watching for the king's arrival or remembering the land they left behind. They are a permanent memorial to the great voyage that started it all. For centuries, these celestial sentinels lay toppled, like almost all the other moai on the island. That changed in 1960. That was the year an American archaeologist named William Malloy, along with his Chilean colleague Gonzalo Figueroa, led a project to restore them. This was a monumental task. One by one, they carefully raised each of the 7 statues back onto their feet, returning them to their silent, watchful posts. This was not just another archaeological project. It was a spark. The restoration of Ahu Akivi was one of the first major projects of its kind on Easter Island. It showed the world, and more importantly, the Rapa Nui people themselves, that these fallen giants could stand again. It ignited a cultural revival, a renewed pride, and a wave of further restoration that continues to this day. So, these 7 rebels are more than just astronomical markers or legendary scouts. They are symbols of resurrection, the first to rise and inspire a people to reconnect with their incredible heritage. Crimson crowns. The moai are incredible on their own, but for the most elite statues, the work was not yet complete. They were destined to wear a crown. Scattered across the island, often separated from their statues, lie massive cylinder-shaped stones of a fiery rust-red color. These are the pukao. The story of these giant topknots adds a final dramatic layer to the mystery of the moai. These pukao are not just large rocks. They are monumental achievements in their own right. Each one is a giant cylinder, carved from a very specific type of volcanic stone known as red scoria. This material is much lighter than the tough used for the moai bodies, but lighter is a relative term. A single pukao could weigh between 5 and 12 tons, with the largest exceeding 10 tons. They were not quarried at the main moai site. They came from a special separate quarry called Puna Pau, a place famous for its distinctively colored red stone. This separate quarry and unique material tell us something crucial. The pukao was a symbol of supreme status. It was not for everyone. Of the nearly 1,000 moai on the island, only about 100 were ever crowned with a pukao. Placing one of these red crowns on a moai was the ultimate sign of power. It amplified the statue's mana, or spiritual energy, broadcasting that this ancestor was among the most powerful, and that their clan was at the top of the social ladder. A moai with a pukao was a statement of unmatched prestige and divine right. This practice creates a breathtaking engineering puzzle. How did the Rapa Nui people get a 10-ton stone hat onto the head of a giant statue that could already be over 30 feet tall? The accepted theory involves a display of incredible ingenuity. Archaeologists propose that builders constructed massive ramps of earth and stone against the front of the already erected moai. Using a system of ropes, levers, and rollers, they would have painstakingly inched the pukao up the slope. Some theories suggest they may have even rocked the pukao from side to side, walking it up the ramp. The final act of balancing this colossal weight on top of the moai would have been a moment of high tension and incredible triumph. The risk was enormous, but the reward was a completed monument of awe-inspiring scale. So, what does the pukao actually represent? Why go to such extreme lengths? The evidence points strongly to a sacred hairstyle. In classic Rapa Nui culture, men of high rank would grow their hair long and tie it into a topknot on their heads. They often dyed their hair a reddish color using pigments and powders. The pukao is a giant permanent representation of this hairstyle. It forever captures the ancestor in a state of ritual readiness, his status and spiritual power solidified in stone. While some suggest it could symbolize a feathered headdress, the connection to the topknot is the most compelling. The pukao was the final blazing red touch that transformed a powerful ancestor into a divine king. Artisans of the stone. Creating the moai was a monumental task, but the tools used were surprisingly simple. The master carvers of Rapa Nui did not have metal. Their entire toolkit consisted of stone. Their most important tool was the toki, a heavy handheld pickaxe made from an incredibly dense and durable volcanic stone. Teams of carvers would swing these toki, pounding away at the volcanic rock face of the quarry. They would carve the basic shape of the moai directly into the bedrock, first creating the front with its face and arms, and then slowly undercutting the body to free it from the mountain. It was a process of relentless pounding and shaping, proof of sheer human determination. Once a statue was free, it was carefully moved down the quarry slope, ready for its journey across the island. The surfaces were then smoothed and refined with grinding stones and abrasive pumice, giving the moai their finished form. This was not a quick job. Creating a single moai required a huge amount of labor, skill, and time, all achieved with simple stone tools. But a finished statue was still just a block of stone. It was powerful in size, but not yet alive with spirit. The final and most sacred act was the ritual that breathed life into it. This transformation happened with the eyes. For a long time, this was just a theory, but then archaeologists made a stunning discovery. They found a single complete eye carved from white coral with a piercing pupil of red scoria or obsidian. This finding confirmed an incredible truth. The empty eye sockets of the moai were meant to be filled. The placement of the eyes was a profound ceremony. Without them, the statue was blind and powerless. With them, the ancestor could see. The moment the eyes were set in place, the mana, that is, the spiritual energy of the ancestor, entered the stone. The moai was no longer a sculpture. It became a living presence, a watchful ancestor capable of protecting the community. This ritual was the final crucial step that connected the world of the living with the world of the gods. The red earth of Rapa Nui. For a long time, the story of Easter Island has been told as a tragic warning. The narrative goes that the people recklessly cut down all their trees. Their society collapsed into chaos and warfare, and their culture crumbled. It's a simple tale of ecological suicide. But a discovery made in 2011 proves that this story is not just simple, it's wrong. What archaeologists found in the soil tells a completely different and far more fascinating story of resilience. The discovery was not of giant statues, but of hundreds of small, unassuming pits dug into the earth. These were not natural formations. They were human-made, and they were filled with a very specific substance, a rich reddish powder known as ochre. Ochre is a vibrant pigment used by cultures all over the world for art, ritual, and symbolism. Finding it was one thing, but understanding how it was made revealed the true sophistication of the Rapa Nui people. This was not a simple process of digging up red dirt. The creation of this ochre was a complex, deliberate act of chemistry. The evidence in the pits shows a precise, multi-stage process. The Rapa Nui people were intentionally burning iron-rich soil in layered pits. They would alternate between fuel, like plant material, and the soil they wanted to transform. The controlled fire would heat the soil, changing its chemical structure and turning it a much brighter, more vibrant red. This wasn't an accidental fire. It was a dedicated, industrial-scale production of color. The sheer number of these pits points to a high demand for this precious pigment, and this is where the entire collapse myth falls apart. The crucial clue lies in when these pits were used. Researchers used radiocarbon dating to pinpoint their age. The stunning result was that this ochre production was in full swing during at least 2 separate phases that came after the period of the supposed societal collapse. This discovery directly contradicts the collapse narrative popularized by Jared Diamond's collapse. The Rapa Nui weren't descending into chaos after deforestation. They were maintaining complex cultural practices requiring organization, knowledge, and community cooperation. Long after the trees were gone, the Rapa Nui people were not descending into darkness. They were actively engaged in a complex, organized cultural practice. The color red held deep spiritual power for the Rapa Nui, likely connected to sacredness and authority. This ochre was probably used to paint bodies for important ceremonies, to color sacred objects, and perhaps even to dye the fibers that made up ceremonial clothing. This discovery paints a new picture of the island's history. It shows people who, faced with massive environmental challenges, did not give up. They adapted. They shifted their focus from carving giant statues to sustaining their cultural and spiritual life in other profound ways. They maintained their traditions, their community, and their identity for generations. The Rongorongo script. Not everything hidden on Easter Island was buried underground. In wooden tablets found in islanders' homes lies a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. This is the mystery of the Rongorongo script. Found on a handful of old wooden tablets, Rongorongo is a system of intricate glyphs, carved symbols of birds, fish, plants, and geometric shapes. It is the only written language ever found in all of Polynesia. And to this day, no one can read it. The glyphs themselves are beautiful and complex, suggesting a full developed writing system. But the meaning behind the symbols is completely lost. The frustrating part is that we do not have a Rosetta Stone for Rongorongo. There is no parallel text in a known language that can help crack the code. Linguists and archaeologists have tried for over a century, but the script remains one of the world's great undeciphered languages. Some believe the tablets contain sacred chants, genealogies of the chiefs, or historical records of the island's epic voyages. But without the key, we are simply left guessing. The tragedy is that the knowledge was likely lost in a very short and devastating period. After contact with the outside world, disease and slave raids in the 1860s wiped out most of the island's wise elders and priests, the very people who would have held the knowledge of how to read the script. By the time the first missionary noted the existence of the tablets in 1864, there may have been no one left alive who understood them. The Rapa Nui people had created a unique form of writing, only to have it stolen from them before they could pass it on. Silent and enigmatic, they are a haunting reminder of a cultural catastrophe. They represent the final untold story of Easter Island, a whispered conversation from the past that we can still see, but can no longer hear or understand. The hope remains that one day the code will be broken, and the island's last great secret will finally be revealed.